Happy Independence Day to all of my American viewers. In honor of the holiday, I'll be making Thomas Jefferson's Sweet Potato Pecan Biscuits from A Taste of History by Walter Staib. This book is a bit of a pop culture book as it follows along with the Taste of History PBS show, which is PBS's public broadcasting channel here in the United States. But the recipes in it that I've tried so far have come out pretty good. The turkey and rutabaga stew recipe was a particular favorite of mine. That being said, it is a TV show cookbook, and I would not recommend it as an actual introduction or guide to American cuisine. More of a fun book to pick and choose recipes that seem interesting to you.
This is one of those recipes that requires a little bit of preparation and work ahead of time before you really get started with the recipe in earnest. In this case, obviously these are sweet potato biscuits, so sweet potatoes are on part of the ingredients list. Now here we have our sweet potatoes, and what we need to do is preheat an oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. And we're going to take these, they've already been pre-washed, and we're going to take them and we're just going to use a fork. You don't have to get in there, we just want to make sure we're penetrating the skin on all of the sides of the potato. And yeah, once we get this done, all right, and then we're gonna brush them in vegetable oil. Make sure you get a good coating over the whole thing. And we're going to do that with each one of our potatoes. Now, the reason that we're doing this is because we have to bake these potatoes to get them soft. And the reason we want to do it the night before you actually make these is that when you put these in the refrigerator after they're done, wrap them in foil and put them in the refrigerator overnight, that they get sweeter after they've been cooked when they have a long time to sort of sit and stew in their own juices. So, all right, we're going to do this. I'm going to finish up with the other two, and then we're going to put them in the oven and then in the refrigerator, and then we will be on to the next step tomorrow. Here is our ingredients and setup for making Thomas Jefferson's sweet potato pecan biscuits. You're going to need light brown sugar. You're going to need chopped pecans. You're going to need allspice, cinnamon, ginger, baking powder, and nutmeg, as well as buttermilk, cubed cold butter. Make sure it's cold. That's important to the chemistry of this. Here is our sweet potatoes that we cooked yesterday and have had overnight. The skins just peel off once you're ready to use them the next day. You don't even need a vegetable peeler or anything like that. They just come off. And then also I hand ground some cloves over here because I didn't have any powdered cloves, but that's what that is. So as far as tools, we're going to need 6 cups of flour here in the middle as well. As far as tools, we're going to use this to cut the butter into the dough. I'll put a link in the description to one of these if you don't have them, but it's super useful if you're going to do a lot of baking. Our handy spatula, a wooden spoon to mix, and a hand grater is another tool that I also find extremely useful for various things, you know, fresh ginger, but in this case, it's going to be used for doing some fine grating of some nutmeg. All right, let's get started. Okay, we're going to start by combining all of the dry ingredients, or the spices and sugars. So we'll go ahead and put sugar in with the flour. So we'll go ahead and throw those cloves in there. And next is baking powder. Okay. And some ginger. I love how a lot of baking combines multiple spices together. because somehow the combination of them, and you really don't have to be, at least in my experience, you do not need to be super exact with spices. Like I just sort of put one in there. I just you kind of use the tablespoon, teaspoon as a guideline. Because yeah, there a lot of times spices are honestly just so strong that a little more than a tablespoon is not going to hurt anything. Okay. Next, we're going to add our salt. Okay. And then we're going to grate a little bit of nutmeg in there. It says about a teaspoon, so you can just kind of eyeball it. There's plenty of spices in here. It's not going to be... Part of the reason, by the way, a lot of recipes will say to use whole nutmeg like I'm doing right now is because the ground nutmeg you get in stores is actually just the center. There's actually another, the coating, the wrapper of the nutmeg itself is called mace. It's another spice. But if you're grating a whole nutmeg, then you get both at the same time. Okay, so let's go ahead and just mix this up. And get rid of any, if you're, let's see, there was a hard bit in there. But if your sugar has any lumps in it or anything like that, you can go ahead and start to break that up now as you mix everything together. You really want to try to get a uniform mixture of spices and flour here. All right, so next thing we're going to do is add our chilled butter. So let's go ahead and do that. And you can do this with your hand. You don't have to do it with a cutter to cut the butter in. The cutter can just sometimes, especially the early stages of doing this, can really sort of make things a little easier. So let's go ahead and this can be a little bit of work because what you want to do is, the cutter also helps you keep the butter chilled because again, you want it to stay chilled to some extent. And your hands would obviously warm up that butter. And you don't really want that, even though we're also going to be adding some other cold elements here. Man, that smells good. I'm going to cheat just a little bit. And break some of these lumps up a little bit. This is definitely an activity where having strong arms helps because you want to sort of cut that butter, and butter's going to mix in, and it's going to give you sort of a sandy but lumpy texture. You can kind of see that starting to happen already here. And this recipe does, if you're following along with the book, make quite a few. Because this is going to be for my 4th of July party, or rather, for my 4th of July party, it's going to be a lot of people there, at least 10, and so it never hurts to have enough where nobody feels like, should I take another one if I really want another one, or if you can anyway, it's always good to make people feel like there's plenty to go around, and this can make 2 to 3 dozen biscuits depending on the size. I also kind of like making the biscuits bigger, you know, sort of big man sized. than what the recipes usually call for, which is usually more like a 2 or a 2.5 inch biscuit cutter. I usually go for one a little bigger than that. Okay. All right, you see how that texture is now starting to become like moist sand here? Or not moist sand, like lumpy sand. That is really what we're going for. Okay. Let's get those bits of butter out of there. Good stuff. Okay, now we can go ahead and toss in our chopped pecans and go ahead and mix that as well. And make sure you're really getting your hand in there. Otherwise you'll end up, if you don't really get in there, then you'll end up with a big pile of like flour or some other ingredient concentrated at the bottom, which you really don't want. Okay, now you're gonna see how soft these sweet potatoes are. We're gonna mix in. You don't even need to do anything special. This stuff breaks up on its own, but we're gonna add the sweet potatoes into the mixture, which is sort of our first wet element. If you see any like leftover skins, go ahead and just remove those. That's not even really a skin. It's sort of just an outer or an inner. If you're looking at it from our perspective, it would be the inner skin of the potato. Yep, that just became mush, which is good. That's what we want. And let's go ahead and start these potatoes, definitely make sure you're basically just pulling them straight from the fridge into your batter, because this is another element. A lot of times when you're baking, you want elements to be chilled, particularly sort of rich pastry type doughs like pie dough. That's probably the most common one, but buttermilk biscuits, a lot of this kind of stuff. You want there to be, you want the elements to be cold, because that helps. Well, I'm actually not sure chemistry wise. If you know, I'd be happy for you to leave it in the comments, but all I know is it works. And that's the most important thing. All right, I'm going to finish mixing this. I'm not going to make you guys sit here and watch because this is going to take a minute, and then we'll pick it up at the next step. All right. So we've got this mixed in pretty well here. Now we want to you may not even need to use all of the buttermilk. We're just going to put a little bit in at a time here and work it in until we can get this into, it's close already, honestly, but we want to get this into where it just becomes a solid ball of dough. Those sweet potatoes have a lot of, you could see though, there's still some crusty bits in there. And at this point I'm using the wooden spoon instead of my hands because I just wiped down and cleaned up, and it's always important to clean while you cook, so you don't end up with such a massive mess afterwards. See, just like that, if I had not cleaned up, it would be even bigger or something. Buttermilk, by the way, you can make. I don't, just because my local grocery stores carry it in small little pint-sized containers. And we're getting real close now to the texture that we want for this dough. But it's just made, you can find recipes online for it. It's just made with mixing whole milk and an acid, usually some sort of citrus juice, and then letting that sit and do its chemical thing. And this is going to make a loose, sticky dough here. You can see how people used to be when people would, you know, housewives, mad respect for old housewives back in the day, but when people would used to spend all day cooking, how much physical effort it is, right? Like people probably burned so many more calories back then. All right. And so you can see it's sort of becoming one big lump here. And that is, we're like 99% of the way there. And doing it with this wooden spoon also kind of just gives, flour takes some time to absorb liquids. And so going slow and giving it a little time to absorb will yield a better result. Sometimes people will just immediately think, oh, it doesn't immediately look the way I want it to, and if you just let it sit for a few minutes, it would have. Okay. We are done with the dough. All right, that's what it should look like. I'm gonna go ahead and get the rolling mat out so that we can roll and cut our biscuits, and we'll be back. All right, here we go. So we're gonna go ahead and dust our rolling surface here with flour. And this is a pretty sticky dough, so you're definitely going to want to roll your rolling pin with flour also. And you basically can't really overdo it in this for this particular recipe because this dough is so sticky. So let's go ahead and get all this dough out. Probably should flour your hands too if you're going to be working with it. Just flour everything. Okay. Let's go ahead and make a cushion shape. Start to roll this out. This is going to yield a lot, so be mindful of how, and don't hesitate. So see how I just had a piece of potato stick. Like I said, this is a sticky dough, so reflour your rolling pin frequently to stop the dough from sticking, and you're going to want to get about a half inch thickness. And this is not a recipe that requires exactness when it comes to the thickness, so just eyeball it. That's what people used to do. Look at that. See, that's what I get for not flouring. Okay. So we're going to cut. Like I said, I'm using a bigger cutter because I like bigger biscuits. And that did not come out clean, but again, it's a wet dough that can be manipulated so you can make it clean. and just put them on. Go ahead and arrange them. You don't need to have leave a lot of space, because this recipe will not spread out horizontally. They will puff up vertically, but they won't spread out horizontally. So, all right, and that's all there is to this part. There's one more part before we go in the oven, but I'm going to finish cutting all these biscuits first, and then I'll come back and show you that part. Okay, we have our sheet lined with biscuits here, 16 of them on this sheet. And so this is just a simple egg wash, 1 egg mixed with a teaspoon of water. And we're just gonna, before these go into the oven's at 425 Fahrenheit, by the way, we're just gonna baste the top of these so they develop that nice, wonderful browned top that everyone associates with buttermilk biscuits. If you're from Europe or other places besides America, what we call biscuits, you probably call scones. So they're not still not exactly the same as each other, but they're really close. So yeah, that's if you want an idea, if you've never eaten something like this before, the southern part of the United States is really kind of biscuit culture, right? There's all sorts of like YouTube videos of British kids try biscuits and gravy for the first time, which is, if you're in the South and you're at a local restaurant, don't go to like a chain like IHOP or something like that and get biscuits and gravy. But if you see a local restaurant and you're traveling in the deep South of the United States, definitely get yourself some biscuits and gravy, or just some biscuits in general. Biscuits are really good. Okay, so we've basted all of those. These are going to go in the oven for about 15 minutes, and I'll show you the result. All right, here is the final result. These look and smell really good. I made a couple tall boys here to show you. You can see how big and thick and crusty with that nice browned glaze on top. They're still a little bit warm. I did let them cool for a little bit. But yeah, these would go great with apple butter. I think I'm gonna stage some with some syrup over the top for the title card of this video. But this is Thomas Jefferson's sweet potato pecan biscuits. Happy 4th of July. Happy birthday, America. If you like my content, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.